Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to share some insider details about Caribbean medical schools that a lot of people don't really talk about, just so you know what you're getting yourself into in case you're thinking of going the Caribbean medical school route. So if that's something you want to know, then keep on watching. So I spoke to four of my friends who are also in Caribbean medical schools. I asked for their opinion on what they think are pros and cons to Caribbean medical schools. So I'm just going to be reading from my notes so I don't mix up their points. I'm going to call them friend A, B, C, and D. And then I'm also going to give my opinion, my 2 cents about whether or not I think you should go to Caribbean medical schools and whether it's a good idea for you. So let's begin. So just to give you a little background about my friends, they're all from Caribbean medical schools. They're currently medical students in Caribbean medical schools, and they are either from Ross or AUC. I wasn't able to get somebody from SGU at this time, so they're going to give us their opinion on Caribbean medical schools. So my friend A said, these are her pros. You don't have to wait to get in. You experience like a new lifestyle in another country. And then she is from Ross, so she said Ross has a good reputation. Just gonna speak a little bit about you don't have to wait. So at least for Ross, AUC, and SGU, they have 3 trimesters or 3 terms that you can start. So as opposed to US medical schools, you can only start in the fall. These 3 medical schools that I know of, you can start fall, spring, summer. Whenever you're ready and you have your stuff ready, you can start school. So that's really good. My friend B said she's also from Ross. Ross provides more than enough educational resources for you to be successful. She said Ross has a strong alumni network, which is very helpful. They help a lot with like how to go about with your clinicals, scheduling your electives, and also when it comes time to apply to residency, the alumni network is really helpful with that. And she said they have US clinical rotations, which is something that you should really consider when you're thinking of going to a Caribbean medical school. They should have a good reputation. They should have students who have matched into residency programs in the US. And one big thing that residency programs look at is their clinical experience in the US. So make sure that the school has their students doing clinical rotations in the US. Somehow they should be able to get that, because that just helps you. It's easier for you to match into a residency program if you're planning on working in the US. Friend C said they have the same educational style and content as the US schools. So Caribbean medical schools, most of their students, if not all, are trying to work in the US. So, and they know that the students have to succeed in their USMLE step exams so that they can match, right? So they know the content, so they prepare the students well for this exam so they can pass and like have a good reputation for their school. So they teach the same thing that US schools will teach you if you go to a US school. And then my friend D said, for her pros, she said you get to live in another country, like my other friend said. And then she said, if you really believe that medicine is something you want to do, then Caribbean schools are there to give you a second chance that US medical schools didn't give you in the first place. So those are the pros that they gave. For me, my pros, I believe their admission system is less rigid compared to US medical schools. Um, they accept students with lower GPAs and lower MCAT scores. It's not like they're going to just take anybody. At least you have to have a decent GPA and a decent MCAT score to be admitted. And I know for Ross and AUC, they have something, it's called MERP, Medical Education Readiness Program or something, where they prepare, it's like a mini pre-med program. I believe it's 3 months. I didn't have to do it, but I know a bunch of people who did it and they said it was helpful, where you do science courses and then at the end of the course you have to sit for your final exam, and they have a minimum score. So if you pass that minimum score, then you get admitted. If you don't pass, then I believe your tuition is refunded, which is really good, but you're not going to be admitted. So they have their own process, their own admission process, but it's just not as rigid as the US medical schools, which is good. And I also think it's nice that you have financial aid to cover your tuition and stuff, because it's really hard to work while you're in medical school. You pretty much can't work. You can't have a decent job, so you're going to be living off of loans, and you also need money to pay for your tuition. So you have financial aid. I know for sure Ross, SGU, and AUC. I can't speak for the others because I don't know much about them. I haven't really met students from these schools. So you have financial aid if you're thinking of going that route to cover your tuition. So that was for the pros. Now for the cons, my friend A said it's harder to get residency and you have to leave the US. You have to leave the US, of course. They're Caribbean medical school, so you go there for your basic sciences, which is usually 4 or 5 semesters. So you have to be on the island. For me, I started off in Knoxville and then went to the island. So but just keep in mind you have to go on the island before coming back to the US for your residency, for your clinical rotations. And then it's harder to get into residency, which is the major issue with Caribbean medical schools. There's actually a stigma that you don't get a job. But if you do your own research, you see that a huge chunk of medical doctors in the US graduated from foreign medical schools, which includes Caribbean medical schools. So it's not like you don't get a job, it's just harder for you to get a job, which we're going to talk more about that. My friend B said it's expensive. Yes, it's expensive. I don't know where people get it from that it's cheaper. There might be cheaper options, but for the 3 schools I'm talking about, it's not as cheap. For per semester, you can pay about 20 to 26,000 per semester. Meanwhile, I'm pretty sure there's some state universities in the US where you pay like 26,000 per year. So it's almost 3 times the cost for tuition. But then it's cheaper, like your living expenses when you're on the island is relatively cheaper than if you are in the US living on your own. But if you live with your family in the US, it should be much cheaper. So she said it's more expensive. She also said not all residency programs are ING friendly, so it limits where you can apply to. Again, it comes back to the residency aspect. You only have certain residency programs that will that will accept students who graduated from non-US medical schools. So it limits where you can apply, it limits what programs you can apply to. So you should keep that in mind. And then she said it's hard to get into certain competitive residency programs. Yes, again, residency, say you want to do like general surgery or neurosurgery or dermatology, those harder to get into residency programs. It's challenging even for US grads, so it's even more challenging for IMGs, people go to Caribbean medical schools. So you have to really do well to be able to match into those programs. It's not like people from foreign medical schools or Caribbean medical schools don't match. They do, but it's a very small percentage who get into it because it's really competitive already. And then the fact that you're from a Caribbean medical school, it just makes it harder. But it's still possible. And then she also said that Caribbean medical schools in general have a larger class size. Um, that is true for Ross and AUC, Ross and SGU, but AUC they have a smaller class size. My friend from AUC said they're about 70 something or so in their class, not up to 100, which is really nice because when you have a larger class size, it's harder to get through to your maybe your advisors, your lecturer, and stuff like that. You still get one on one with them, but it might be challenging to get like that appointment with them because they have a larger population to deal with. My friend D said Caribbean medical schools have a high attrition rate, so the number of students who fall out of the program compared to the number of students who where are needed is really high. So you should also look into that. Keep in mind that Caribbean medical schools are for profit, so they will just take a bunch of students, and then if you can make it through medical school, you end up dropping, but they got their money already. She also mentioned the stigma for residency. Again, it's harder to get into residency programs, so you have to apply to a ton of programs just to increase your chances of matching. She said you're gonna have to apply to 3 times more programs compared to a US medical grad to get the same or even less number of invitations or interviews for residency. And then she also mentioned that there are so many hoops that you have to go through. So I believe it was last year or so the Step 2 CS was discontinued. But for IMG's Caribbean Medical School students, you have to now pass the OET, which is an English exam, and we also have to get certified by ECFMG before we can apply to residency programs or work as a resident. So those are just some extra things that you have to go through, which US medical grads don't have to go through. And it's not just that, they're also expensive to get to write this exam and get this certification done. For me, my cons, there's a lot of traveling. You have to go back and forth unless you have to spend your break. You want to spend your break on the island. That's fine if you want to do that. But of course, after being there for 3 months, you want to come back home and see your family. So there's a lot of traveling, and they it depends on where you're coming from. I remember there was one time I was traveling from, I believe that was Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, and I had to spend the night in the airport because the flight got there too late, and then the next flight was leaving really early in the morning. Um, so that's just something you have to keep in mind. There's a lot of traveling, and of course, comes with money. So it could be difficult to transition to the life on the island, especially for people who were born and raised in the developed world. That could be a challenge. Their lifestyle, it's slower, they're like slower paced. Things don't get done on time, so you should expect that. And also your food choices might be very different from what they have over there. So that's something you should keep in mind. But for me, I was born and raised in Africa, so it wasn't that much of an issue for me. Like, I've lived in the slow world, so I know. So it was easier for me to adapt to the life on the island. So yeah, so those are some really good points that were raised by my colleagues from Caribbean medical schools. But at the end of the day, like one of them said, do I think that you should go to Caribbean medical schools? Do I think it's a good idea? I'm on the fence. Because of all the cons and especially the issue with residency, you have to do really well to match into the programs that you want to, especially if you want to go to a competitive program. So you really have to work your butt off to stand a chance of matching. It's not impossible. People still get it done, but just know that you're gonna have to work extra hard to get a residency position. That said, it's an option. If you've tried other options and it's not working for you, that's a great option. Just make sure that you do your research on these schools. I know for SGU, Ross, and AUC, I know the students do well in the US when they come back for residency. You can look them up. A lot of the students are matching all over the US in different specialties. So those I know are good schools that you can look into if you want to go the Caribbean Medical School route. But again, do your best to avoid them. It just makes life easy for you or easier for you if you go to a US medical school because you don't have to travel and all that. It's easier for you to match into residency programs. So it's just easier. So if you have to take extra classes to increase your GPA, try doing that. If you want to do a post back, try doing that. If you want to take the MCAT 2 3 times, try doing that. And then if all else fails, then you can go the Caribbean Medical School route. So that's all I have for today, and I hope that this helps you as you make your decision on whether or not to go the Caribbean Medical School route. And thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, bye.